Welcome to another episode of our podcast series on Operation Sindoor. I am Dr. Ulupi Bora, Distinguished Fellow at CENJOWS, and your host for today's session. Today's episode is titled Operation Sindoor Maritime Strategy, Diplomacy, and Narrative Warfare. This discussion aims to explore Operation Sindoor not just as a tactical military engagement, but as a multidimensional operation, one that reveals evolving maritime posture, strategic signaling in the Indo-Pacific, and the crucial role of narrative control in modern warfare. Joining us today is naval officer and maritime historian, Commodore Dr. Srikant Kesnur, Vishesh Seva Medal, retired. An alumnus of the National Defense Academy, Commodore Kesnur he has commanded two frontline warships, INS Vidyagiri and INS Jalastva, and served as defense advisor at the High Commission of India in East Africa. His academic contributions are equally remarkable, with teaching assignments at the National Defense Academy, Defense Services Staff College, and Naval War College, Goa. The officer has a PhD from Mumbai University, along with 5 postgraduate degrees. He has been lead writer and chief editor of 12 books, monographs, and many journals for the Indian Navy, and has emerged as a leading voice in maritime education, outreach, engaging the public through lectures, writing, podcasts, and even cinema. He humbly calls himself a maritime evangelist. Sir, it is a great honor to have you with us. We welcome you to the show.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ulupi. It's a pleasure to be here, and thanks to CENJOWS for giving me this opportunity to share my thoughts with you.
Sir, let's begin our deep dive into Operational Sindoor. And to begin with, when we look at Operation Sindoor from a grand strategic perspective, what key takeaways can we draw in terms of India's maritime posture and signaling in the Indo-Pacific?
Thank you. I will sort of break that into two aspects. One is what you talk about the maritime posture, and second is what is the sort of signals it sends in the Indo-Pacific. So, what was our maritime posture specific to Operation Sindoor? As you can see, and as we all know, the Indian Navy deployed very proactively right after Pahalgam. It responded. There was a large task force assembled of aircraft carrier plus very powerful guided missile destroyers, frigates, submarines, whatever, And then they were all poised in the theater of war or operations, and they were ready to strike. So this was the maritime posture that India adopted, and it has adopted these positions even before, as we can discuss later when we talk about the history of Indian Navy's deployments. Now, what is the larger lesson it sort of sends in the Indo-Pacific? I think there are 3 or 4 things you need to view this from. The first, of course, is that over a period of time, the Indian Navy is showing its strength and ability to deploy is in itself something, what we call a force to reckon with every time. And if you see, we have had a long list of deployment of our forces, whether it was Kargil, whether it was Parakram, whether in more recent times, after Uri, after Balakot, after Galwan. So the Indian Navy, right, if you draw a sort of line over the last 25 years, it has done this sort of coercive deployment vis-a-vis Pakistan. And if you combine that with our showing in the counter-piracy operations, the way we have been busy in Operation Sankalp since December 23, our response to HADR missions, I think what you are showing is Indian Navy within the Indo-Pacific, particularly the Indo part of the Indo-Pacific, is a force to reckon with. And importantly, Dr. Ulupi, I don't know how many navies have been mobilized so often in pursuit of national interests. I mean, whether you see last 75 years, whether you see last 25 years, Usually, at one point of time, navies used to be deployed for global missions. I think Indian Navy, by um, being mobilized or deployed often for regional issues or Indo-Pacific issues, and at the same time for national call whenever required. I think it's showing itself to be a top-class professional force, which carries a certain weight and heft in the Indo-Pacific. Now it is for friends and adversaries alike to take note of. You know.
Thank you so much, sir. Rightly said, it is one of the sir. My question to you, share your views on how do these broader strategic insights translate into actionable shifts at the operational level for the Indian Navy.
See, I wouldn't call it shifts because, yes, at the grand strategic level, there has been a paradigm shift in the way India has been responding. And I'm not taking any political sides, but we have shown a certain resolve and all since Puri, Balakot, as I said. There is a new normal that India has signaled that we will not, the earlier policy probably of strategic restraint will give way to a response every time such a terror activity takes place. And the Indian Armed Forces are working within that framework over the last 10 years or more. Now, the point is, does it indicate a shift at the operational level for Navy? Not necessarily. There will certainly be, I mean, post Sindoor, there will certainly be some tweaking with regard to, I mean, every deployment, everything, particularly because there was kinetic action this time, there will be some lessons, and that lessons will lead to certain tweaking. But I don't think there is a shift at the operational level because you must remember the Navy organically has strengths whereby it can deploy. As I've said, it has deployed before. It can continue to do that. What may be the other things it will look at? One, I think it will continue to concentrate on enhancing further maritime domain awareness. It will look carefully at what transpired during this war, how might drones affect operations at sea as it did this time at land. I think these would be some of the things it would be studying, though I believe it's already studying them. The second thing it would look at it is, look, we have got a fantastic advantage over Pakistan in terms of, sheer firepower, sheer combat power. How do we translate this, combat capability into distinctive advantages on the kinetic field if required to do so in future such episodes or incidents? I think that's another area that the Navy will be looking at. But on the whole, I would not call any shift. Operationally, we've done this many times before. But yes, there will be certain tweaking based on the lessons of operations. You know.
Right, sir. Sir, given your expertise as a naval historian, how do you interpret the Navy's near involvement in Operation Sindoor?
Listen, I would take a very small exception to the phrase near involvement. I think the Navy was fully involved from the moment go. The entire Operation Sindoor was a very highly coordinated operation, which saw all three services involved, which is why you saw all the three Director Generals of Operations there. So the Navy was involved right from the word go. We can't call it near involvement. Having said that, I take your larger point that uh, direct kinetic action by naval vectors did not come into play this time. So what would be my take on that? Uh, yes, I mean certain experts, certain veterans, and all have felt that perhaps this was an opportunity for the Navy to also, as I said, translates its significant firepower into certain kinetic action. And that point is well noted. I mean, people in the Navy who have served before and who have been part of naval operations nostalgically feel that yes, Navy should play a very visible role in such operations. Having said that, it is important to understand that the Navy offers a set of options to the political and bureaucratic and military apex leadership. And it is ultimately for the leadership to take those options. You must remember that the Navy's involvement in any conflict or war is at a certain threshold of escalation. So I'm sure people will weigh that. What does Navy's getting into mean in terms of the escalatory ladder? The Navy can hit military targets as well as economic targets, disrupt commerce. Coast is full of economic targets. So I think these are all factors that are weighed in by the leadership. So on the whole, I think they call the Navy a silent service. We have performed the job of a silent service, which is to poise right there in the operation of war, threaten in the theater of war, threaten Pakistan of what may be the consequences if it led to escalation, showcased what we have, and if that has led in some ways to de-escalation, I think it's something we all should be happy about.
Right, sir. Sir, Operation Sindoor showcased a notable preference for high-tech, indigenously built equipment, a trend which the Indian Navy has long championed. How do you see this operation reflecting the Navy's push for indigenization? And what are your views on the future prospects of indigenous arms manufacturing in India, especially in the maritime domain?
See, as you brought out, I think what this skirmish or whatever you call it, Operation Sindoor, or 4 days of action, has showed two or three things very clearly. One is indigenous equipment had a role to play, and our involvement, our dedication in focusing on them over the last few years is over the last many years is paying dividends. The second is that if we have to buy from abroad, we have to do smart buys to fill in the gap, and then immediately start manufacturing them and then start designing and working on them in India. Because ultimately, if you go to war, the lesson is very clear, particularly given India's stated position of strategic autonomy at the highest level. The lesson is very clear. We need to start making, manufacturing, designing, producing arms in India. And of course, one way to make it competitive is to start exporting them too, because the dynamics of market is also important. And I'm sure you people at CENJOWS study this frequently. So that's a very, very clear and present lesson, if I can call it that. And it's been hoisted, and it is good to see the interest in industry, because ultimately you need industry, public private partnership, and all of this. And that is where I think the Navy offers some great lessons. Since we have been into indigenization right since 1960, and at this point of time, we are building everything from aircraft carriers to nuclear submarines. We are building almost every ship that is being built in India. We've gone far ahead in lots of other aspects of indigenization. I think Navy offers some lessons. In particular, two or three things. I think the Navy has what we call scientists in uniform. For a long time, the reason our indigenization programs have succeeded is because we have given career naval officers the leeway to be the interface between the service and industry and scientific community, which probably everyone ought to be doing. The second is that we have been nimble footed. I mean, very recently meaning a few years back, we set up something called the Naval Innovation and Indigenization Organization. We want to give, encouragement to startups and to innovation. We said on 75 years of independence with patent 75, new technologies. So this is a constant thing in the Navy's higher ups, and credit goes to the Navy's leadership and people that we have always thought of being indigenous first. This does not mean that everything that is made by or for the Navy is indigenous. So, what about the future? Your question is right. One thing is, look, if something is being made for any service in India, I think then the possibility of using that for other services, whether Army, Navy, or Forces, is fairly. I mean, BrahMos is a solid example, right? You use BrahMos in a land version, you can use in a sea version. All three services can use it. Today, if you design an engine for your fighter aircraft, the same engine can also be for the fighter aircraft that is going to be used on the aircraft carrier. So we need to focus a lot more on everything that can be done together to a large extent. I mean, look, if Kalani Forge is going to make guns for India, for Indian Army, I'm sure at some stage the guns for the Indian Navy can also be done by them. Of course, there will be specific requirements for each service. In the Navy, the specific requirements relate to movement on on the seas, stabilization for movement, the roll, the pitch, the yaw, sea state, corrosion. There are certain unique aspects, but these are technically surmountable. It is not an impossible solution. Uh, I think the way ahead is good. We should grab this opportunity. The Navy offers some lessons. But Dr. Ulupi, one problem which I think think tanks like you should highlight, our problem is not so much at the armed forces level, and the industry interface can work out. One real problem that is happening is actually at the level of education in terms of engineering college. The fact that manufacturing sector, has certain problems. To do world class piping, wiring, welding, you need people to study that in engineering colleges, in diploma, in ITIs, and there our strength is going low. Either people are seeking white collar jobs in service sectors, or the good welders and fitters and mechanicians are going for attractive jobs elsewhere. So you may design a great ship, you may have top engineers, but you can't get to do great, building of the lattices, so to say, if you don't have good craftsmen and skilled workers. And that is an area which I understand in my interaction with people in the industry is an area of concern, and we need to think of that.
Right, sir. Very rightly said regarding the craftsmen and the skilled workers that we need. So, sir, my last question to you would be: so you have been deeply involved in exploring the military media interface, and you have even conducted capsules for media professionals. In the context of Operation Sindoor, how do you view the war of narratives? Uh, how do you interpret this contest of perception? And what lessons can be drawn about shaping strategic communication during future conflicts?
Uh, it's a hot question. And you're right. I have studied this. I've studied this as a passion long back, including theoretical, conceptual aspects. Right, right since I joined the Navy, the military media dynamics has always fascinated me. And I did study that in a formal way for my staff course thesis, for my, higher command thesis. I did a case study of the Kargil War, media coverage and all that. So yes, this is an area, and yes, I do capsules for defense journalists too. So broadly speaking, I think the short answer is we shouldn't jump to hasty conclusions still about if anyone has won the narrative war, and if so, who is it? But broadly speaking, I'll offer three or four, let's say, things that obtain from this discussion. The first is there are two contrasting viewpoints regarding the media coverage. There are some people, or let's say the narrative pattern. There are some people, and I respect a lot of what they say, very senior, respected people who say that we should have been a bit more proactive, that having done such wonderful kinetic action, such precise action, dismantling terrorists, our fight against terrorism is not the narrative that's gone, the world over. and Pakistan has in some ways been able to challenge that. That's one point of view made by very respected Indian and international experts, and I take that point. Equally truly, there is the opposing viewpoint, which is valid in its own way, which says that look, India as a big nation, as a nation, which is a power in its own right, should not worry or fret too much about these narratives. That what say the Washington Post says, or New York Times says, or the BBC or CNN say, beyond a point, should not worry us. We should worry about the message we have delivered to Pakistan and which he would have got. And over a period of time, this will come out, and big confident nations do not worry too much about how they should be perceived. That's a kind of mentality of the past. Now, both these points of view are valid. So, how do we go or move further from here? I think one of the interesting things that has happened, Dr. Udupi, is that initially, and I'm being very careful in my comments here. Initially, when whatever came, and there were certain Pakistan, reports about presumed tactical losses by India and all that, uh, a lot of people who commented were international relations experts, area studies experts, media experts, who came in, and their comments became seen by everyone. Later on, it was the technical experts, the air power experts, the OSINT experts who came. And when people like John Spencer or others came in and they started making their analysis, more recently, this gentleman, Mr. Ludwig, has made a very good analysis. When the technical experts came in and they said, hey, look, uh, so much has been destroyed by Pakistan so well, and with the Indian air defense working perfectly. I mean, we know that our air defense worked well, nothing happened here. I think that shift has started. If you see what is coming on Twitter now, if you see what is coming elsewhere in international media, slowly the word has started veering around to the view. And I think overall, if you see this parliamentary delegation, other things, all of that will contribute to turning the tide, in my opinion, over a long lead of time, as we say. So, final couple of points. But having said that, what should we do from here? I think two or three things. One is I think we really need to think of a Indian news media organization which has its own voice. We must create our equivalents of BBC, Al Jazeera, or whatever it is, which has penetration in international capitals world over. Our big media should also invest in correspondents and journalists everywhere. And I believe people in media, and I'm not taking sides either way, should be educated a lot more on aspects of defense and strategy. And that's where people like you come. So, yes, the narrative war or the perceptional war is important. I think we need to study. Maybe you guys could have a seminar on that issue. But it's too early to say. From what seemed initially, the tide has changed. That much I can say.
Right, sir. I mean, actually, we should have India should have a news media, which has its own voice. Very rightfully, you have mentioned that.
Yeah.
So, sir, we come to an end of this podcast. Thank you once again for sharing your invaluable insight and shedding light on the many layers of Operation Sindoor. And from maritime diplomacy to narrative warfare to this reinforces how future conflicts will be won, not just through military might, but through strategic clarity and information dominance. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us. Don't forget to follow this series for more thought provoking conversations.
Uh, Thank you. Pleasure being with you. Wonderful. And thanks to you and CENJOWS once again. As always, a pleasure.